Howdy, I'm Matt, and in this episode we are going to be taking a look at the brand new Eachine Razor. Now, I just want to state from the very beginning, this is us taking a first look at this model from the details which we can work out ourselves to try and make an educated, or make some educated guesses about the model and how it's going to perform and who made it and some other links as we go through. So, I also need to make you a heads up. I actually spoke to Banggood. I've got one of these on the way, and actually there's a spoiler alert. It's due to arrive on September the 28th. So as soon as it comes into stock, I've already got one on my orders page and we should receive it a week or so later. So we will be definitely taking a look at the Eachine Razor as soon as it's available. Howdy, it's Matt here from the future. I'm just adding this in when I'm editing it. I've been and created a dedicated fan group to the Eachine Razor, and I've put a link not only up on the bottom of your screen, but also in the video description for you too. So if you're seriously interested in this model, this is the group where I'm going to post the updates first about the model, and of course it's also going to be a great place for us to discuss about this model specifically, and of course any modifications or tweaks or anything which comes to light over time. The group is now available, and like I said, I've put the link to it in the video description and up on the screen for you too. So a shameless plug for a brand new Facebook group, but if you're seriously interested in the Razor, then that is where the updates are going to happen first. So anyway, let's get back to looking at this model. Super curious to say the least. Now, before we go any further, I just want to put this model into context. And I tell you what, as I'm chatting, what I'm going to go and do is pop across to YouTube, and I'm going to rewind this and mute it wherever the mute button is, and we'll hit play, and you can have a look at some of their footage for it. Now, the reason why my eyes are very open to this model is because it's a bigger version of the ZoeHD Drift, a model which I was, and I'm sure many of you have been, frankly, very impressed with. The Drift is an extremely good model, and the only real one way that ZoeHD, specifically the people who created it, the manufacturer, could make that model better or improve it, besides one minor point which I'll mention in a moment, is that they just need to make a bigger version. That's the short summary. The ZoeHD Drift is an absolutely fantastic model. I'm sure at the end of this video I'll put some links to the ZoeHD Drift, so if you've not seen that one before, absolutely corking, sub 250 grams, will fly for days. It really does fly exceptionally well. It is capable of aerobatics, although there is a distinct warning on the box, not for going mental. It really is a glider, and as such a glider format model, it does exceptionally well once you realise it's not really meant for ragging its nuts off in like a speed aspect, but for just getting up in the thermals. I know that I've flown mine from a local farm here in the middle of the UK summer. We're talking like 30 plus degrees, and it just stayed in the sky for what felt like forever, easily over 1 hour. So that's where I'm setting this video off from, is that if it's anything like the ZoeHD Drift, then happy days. I think we are all going to be pretty impressed with it. So one thing to note is this flying location. Now, there is going to be a big spoiler here because I'm going to get straight to it, which is that I am 99% sure, as you will now be, is that not exactly the same flying condition. So I don't have any confirmation. However, that panning shot there, which I'll rewind again, is exactly the same location as where this model is being flown to. And I'm not the only person to pick this up. There's been several other people which have been and put the link between ZoeHD and Eachine. Now, we need to make the point really obvious here, is that Eachine rebrand models, okay? Or they, and we've had this discussion with the Airloader a couple of days back, which was that Eachine is a brand and they rebrand or specify. There is definitely somebody there who is writing or working with third-party manufacturers like ZoeHD. Is this case, it's quite obvious it's ZoeHD, to create and to bring new models to the market, okay? And that's absolutely fine. We're seeing it here with Banggood, and it happens throughout the globe. Somebody has some specifications, they work with a manufacturer to create a product of some form, and then us as consumers go on and purchase the products, okay? That's just pretty much how the world works. So don't think for one moment, oh my god, it's a ZoeHD or a Sonic model clone. That's not the case at all. This is just the way the world works, okay? So taking a look at this one, and it's got me really interested because I genuinely do feel the only major upgrade which you can do to a ZoeHD drift is just make it bigger and maybe call it a draft, which I have hinted very heavily. I think that would be a really good name. Do you think it would be a good name? Let me know in the comments. But coming back to a point is that, yeah, 1.2 meter wingspan, and there's hints of it being an FPV kit as well. Oh, one thing which I want to make a point, there was an interesting discussion a couple of days back over, let me just open this up in a new window, over having the FPV camera going through the propellers. Now, there's two ways which you, well, the first thing is that looking through a propeller for an FPV camera is no less distracting than having an on-screen display. In fact, I would personally argue that the details on specific, it depends how you set it up, of course, but most details within iNav, for example, or the Eagle Tree Vector can be very intrusive, and actually you learn just to look straight through those details unless you're looking for a specific detail as you going through the screen. The same thing applies for the propeller. Yes, at different throttle settings you will see the propeller go through the screen, but you literally just see through it within the first moment of within the first minute of the flight. You go, oh yeah, I can sometimes see the propeller, and you literally just look straight through it. Now, it's interesting that they are saying and including an FPV version. Now, I say interesting because there's no real indication on how the stock setup for FPV is going to be. And you can see me clicking through the photos, and none of these are indicating perhaps where the FPV camera should be placed by their recommendations. So opening that up a little bit larger, and again looking into the other photographs which we've got here, there is no hint on there. So from a personal point of view, look, does that flight controller not look very familiar to you? Is that not the co-pilot which they've got in there? I would be extremely surprised that they've definitely made it, that's for sure. And again, just looking at their wing mechanism, I recognize this plate mechanism, and that was the one thing which they could improve in the drift, is the latching mechanism, is that's just an extended version of what they've got inside the drift. So it's nice to see they are capable of creating or manufacturing a larger piece to secure the wings. So that is nice to see, to say the least. But coming back to my point is that this is being packaged up as an FPV kit potentially. Obviously, we are going to be absolutely nowhere near the 250 grams, because remember, it's a 1.2 meter wingspan. It's going to be a big old model, to say the least. Also, there's a curiosity here which is around the timing, is because two models to come out very close to each other with very similar tails and very similar latching mechanisms to hold that rear boom into place. There's a lot of similarities going on here, and it would make made sense that while you're building a smaller model, and there were some requirements for a larger glider, for example, had been pitched to a third party like Eachine, for example, is that you would reuse the same kind of technologies, so that latching mechanism, over different models. It just makes sense, because if something works, then heck, then use it. Anyway, let's get into the details of the model itself. So I've mentioned, so it's made out of EPO foam. I'm sure EPP is always more desirable, to be frankly honest, because it's a more robust material. Although EPO, if it's manufactured well and it's nice and dense, is equally just as good. in short. I would be quite happy with that. Now, the one oddity which I've got, and actually would probably be my suggestion to you, Banggood are actually sending me the kit version because I asked for the kit version specifically, but in all seriousness, I would probably suggest the plug and play kit version for a model like this. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it's just a big unknown right now as far as the motors go. I've had gliders in the before previously. The Phoenix 2000 is a prime example. Trying to choose the right motor for that, because I bought the kit version and didn't buy the plug and play version, was a bit of a pain in the rear. And I remember it took me like an hour just to get those 4 screws in that motor mounting in the front. Absolute nightmare. So sometimes, dude, let's be brutally honest, it is just a better idea just to get the stock components. Again, thinking about it logically, if this is coming from via ZoeHD, which I feel quite confident in suggesting that's where it comes from a couple of different design choices on the model itself. Some of those would be very familiar to you, and also just because of the flying locations are pretty much exactly the same between the two. Yeah, very, very curious indeed. But coming back to that, yeah, I'm using these words, very curious. So plug and play, I would definitely suggest that, because you know that you're not going to have to rattle around or get an external motor from somewhere because the motor which you've got doesn't fit. Does that make sense? Then going through the specifications, the one thing which I'm a little bit surprised about, but one thing to be slightly wary of is the 2 amp BEC. Now, the reason why I'm saying for you to go slightly wary with a 2 amp BEC is because you'll have 2 servos in the wings and you've got elevator. Do we have rudder on this model? That would be quite disappointing if we don't have rudder on here, which it looks like we don't have rudder on this model. So, sad face, to be honest. I would have, as I'm sure you would have, liked rudderage on this model. And yeah, looking in close there, no, there isn't any rudder surface per se being on there, although if it's a larger model, modifying it to have a rudder would be relatively easy. So yeah, maybe that's a downside, although I've got to be honest, as much as on one hand that I'm disappointed that we don't have rudder on this model, what I actually find is that the rudder for the slope, if you go slope sawing, is absolutely fantastic. The rudder with iNav, not normally a very good idea, and what you normally do, what you should do, in my humble opinion, is when it comes to models which have got rudders with iNav, is that you disable the yaw stability, because Andrew Newton, or Sir Andrew Newton, did a video only a short while ago which showed iNav really overreacting and handling the rudder incorrectly, and his simple solution was just to stop iNav from changing the yaw via the rudder. And it's literally just one setting which you can put in there. So go and check Andrew Newton's video for that one. So it positives, and I'm trying to remain as neutral as I can and just try and balance things out as far as it goes for the model itself. Going back in there, so I was talking about the ESC, yeah, 2 amps. My point being is that maybe that's not a problem now. The reason being is that when you've got 4 servos of a semi-decent size, 2 amps is only just adequate. And the reason why I'm saying only just adequate, I always remember my very first RC model airplane which I bought, which was the AXN Cloud Surfer, and I bought the plug and play kit, and that had a 2 amp BEC in it, and the ESC and the BEC in it was absolutely wholly inadequate at that time. And I remember on my very first flight I couldn't control the model, and the reason for that wasn't because I wasn't putting the right stick movements in, or the wrong stick movements. It was because when I used ailerons, elevator, and gave it a little bit of rudder, is that the ESC BEC crapped out and the model just landed, as was a very known issue with the AXN Cloud Surfer originally. I even now remember Sir Bruce mentioning that. That's why I bought the blue Hobby King ESCs, and I still use those ESCs to this day because that's what Bruce recommended that we put in the AXN Cloud Surfer. So I am always very cautious of low current rating BECs, and again also you need to be aware of that. So if you were to go on to put a flight controller in here, which we'll now go and take a quick look, where's that photo which they had? There, that's the one we're after. So there is a spot for a GPS unit, so we are already thinking iNav, to be brutally honest. And yeah, doesn't that look very familiar to ourselves of what we got in there? So if we, yeah, that definitely looks like the co-pilot which we've got in there. So a Maytech F411 flight controller would be complete no-brainer for this model. Just be looking at the size of that board on there, I would say Maytech F411 would be the perfect choice for this model. And getting back, we got the GPS which would then sit on top. Again, very similar to the Drift. If you've not seen the Drift, go and take a few moments to go and take a look at that model, and there are an awful lot of similarities with that. Coming back now full circle round to the ESC is that you need to be aware of that, because if you use a flight controller which does not have a quality BEC on board like the Maytech ones have, is that 2 amps may not be enough to run 3 servos, maybe your FPV camera and your GPS and any other electronics like your receiver, for example. You are very, very close to the limit. So a minimum of 3 amps, and I genuinely mean that, a minimum of 3 amps, or use a quality flight controller which has a good BEC already built into it. The plug-and-play kit, I probably, as in the FPV camera version, I'd probably not suggest that on there. And I wonder if the Eachine Safe flight controller with GPS is just a rebranded version of the co-pilot. That wouldn't surprise me. Why would you not do that and then get it underneath one big brand? That kind of makes sense. So there we go. Besides that, how would I set this model up myself? I think let's go and take a look at the model here. I think realistically what I would do is mount the FPV camera potentially up here on the top, either in front of or in or above the air vent which is on the nose of the camera, on the canopy. That just makes really, really good sense. I would probably, if I'm brutally honest, I would stick a Foxeer, I forget which one it is. It's the tiny little, it's a 13 pounder. I'll put all the details in the video description, okay? So everything which I've mentioned, I'll put in the video description for you. I would probably do a rear-facing camera, and it's a Foxeer Nano. I'll remember it in a minute. That's really annoying. Tiny, super cheap, really good. As a rear-facing camera, I would probably put that in there. Exactly what I did with my Dart 250G, and also what I did with the Drift as well, because hey, look, if you're only at Sky for an hour, having multiple views is really a very simple thing to do, especially if you've got either an FPV camera switcher, which I've covered on this YouTube channel before, or if you've got a flight controller which allows multiple camera inputs. Most of the Maytech boards do that. So it's, again, is a very simple and cheap upgrade, and it adds a whole new dimension to flying around FPV. Anyway, getting back to my point, I definitely have the camera on the top. The video transmitter is a bit of a questionable item right now, the reason being on its location. I don't know, and you don't know, how much space we've got in that tail, so that in a model like this, I don't think chopping the stuff into the wing is going to be the best idea. So it's going to be a curious one on the location of the camera and the video transmitter, where we place the receiver. Again, maximum separation where possible, although some of you, probably like myself, would want to take the wings off. So if we haven't got it depends on what's going to happen with the wings themselves and how thick they are, because one thing which I did notice is that if we take a closer look in the photos, is look how thin that wing cord is. It does look really super thin, so I'm personally hoping for, if we've got some underside shots, yes, these are obviously not of the real model, because I'm not seeing any lines in here for stability, extra carbon rods inside of the wings, some which you normally spot from especially from the underside. So yeah, it is going to be a curious one as far as the placement of electronics goes. Will I end up putting them out in the wings, which would be the most desirable place for maximum separation, or am I going to ending up with like the receiver coming out the rear of the model, out of to where the tail boom meets the fuselage, and then the video transmitter up on the nose with the camera, and then the GPS and the module in the middle, right above the flight controller? That's probably where it'll end up, if I'm honest. But until we get one here, we just genuinely don't know. And I'm probably sure that's going to be the same layout for yourself as well. Get back to the wing cord. It does look really thin, and it does also look like there's a purposeful... I need to go careful with the term, because I always get corrected when it's wrong. I'm just going to say that the tips of the wings tip down, so that will create some form of wash to give the model some extra stability. There we go. I'm sure somebody will put the correct terms for that in the video description, because I did get corrected on that the other day. And look, you can see it in there for sure that that model really is arched over. So it should in theory be relatively quick in the scheme of things. I'm not talking about massively fast, but it's a very thin wing section which they've got, so that's going to normally equate to a faster cruise speed. Although that wing, which again I'm looking here in the background, if I can grab that, no, it's that image there which I'm after, you'll see that the wing has quite an arch to it, so that should also give us quite a bit of lift. It is going to be a very curious model once we get here. I think just looking at it, we've had other models which we were looking at very recently, the Eachine air loader, for example. Very like, it was like a 12-year-old's car. You know, they put a spoiler on it, they painted everything, they put bumpers on it and changed the wheels, and it was a whole mishmash of things like kind of like thrown into a model, like, oh, it must have this and this and this and this. No, this one's actually very clear. It's very obvious that it's had a clear objective to it, that they've wanted to create a 1.2 meter wingspan glider, and they've been stuck to the specification as well, rather than adding a tube here for the pit-up tube and a holder for something else, you know, or 2 extra motors on top, maybe a 5th motor as well to go with it. It is blatantly obvious that there has been a specification to this, and someone half knows what they're doing, to be brutally honest. So yeah, very, very curious. I will put a link to the video which we were talking about and we saw here a few moments ago. I'll put a link to that in the video description for you, so you can go and watch it for yourself and go and see how it flies according to them. I must admit the drone footage isn't particularly good. I'll also include the Dart XL video in there, so you can make your own comparison and put the two together. And of course, I'll put a link to this model in the video description for you. Now, I also want to just like state from the very beginning, we always hold off final judgment here on a model until we get it here and get it out flying. Okay, remember, we are looking and trying to make some informed decisions as best as we can from flat pictures on the screen and a not particularly great video to see it flying around. The final setup for this model and any modifications which it may, or little small tweaks which it may need, are right now a very much unknown. But the good news is that we're a couple of days into September now. This model is going to, by the looks of it, going to get dispatched at the end of September. So in early October, I am expecting this model here on the workbench, and we can take an up-close look at the model. It does look, realistically, the build time is going to be straightforward, because it will be a case of putting a little bolt in for the tail, putting the boom through, and then fishing wires through or control horns. We don't know how they're going to join the fuselage. Oh, we already know, because we saw a photo just a moment ago. Let me scroll down. Things are starting to click in my head now as we've been investigated this more. We can see there on that photo is that they've got a servo pointing down the back. That must be for the elevator. Okay, now actually thinking out loud is that if you really wanted to put a rudder servo in there and you were willing to modify the model, you could take that servo out, put it round, and then put 2 side by side, so, or maybe one which is slightly higher, and then get 2 rods to go down to get a rudder in there. I'm not fussed by it not having rudder, to be brutally honest. Anyway, I was trying to wrap up. I've derailed myself. I'm renowned for doing that. Anyway, the point which I'm trying to basically make, the model's going to be here soon. We're going to take a look at it on the workbench. We've taken a quick glance on there. We've seen some flight footage. We've done our best to join the real manufacturer to the model, okay, which I'm pretty sure by, and just by that flying location and a few design choices in here, I would feel quite certain that this has come from Sonic Model or ZoeHD. You'll know them for a collection of other models, which I'm sure you already know, and insult your intelligence for that one. So it does have some form of pedigree to it, unlike a certain model which we were looking at the other day. As what happens to the setup, don't know. So this is where I'm going to open the discussion to you. A, does this model interest you? Yes or no? And I'd love to know, yes, why yes and why no, because I'm just curious. Because this one, I am super curious. I am genuinely looking forward to flying this one. I think it looks pretty good. Number one, I can't wait just to fly it au naturel, no flight controller, just to see how it does in the sky and just to play around with it. B, I cannot wait to chuck it off a slope. I think it's going to go really well on there. And C, I would love to see what kind of efficiency which we can get with this model when or if we load it up with 18650 Li-ion battery packs. Because one thing which I, again, just kind of derailing myself, is that there was a hint on batteries in there. Look, optimized for 2S 18650 batteries. I'm already thinking, well, depends upon the CG. Maybe we could get 4S in that nose and put those 18650s like 2 and then 2 and join them up that way to get some. But it really does depend on what it feels like and whether we could get away with that in the model. Again, a 1.2 meter wingspan model, even on 2S, is going to get some distance into it. If we were able to up the capacity or to up the voltage by adding more cells either in series or in parallel, that really is going to extend the range of a model like this. And yeah, that is where I'm starting to get super curious. So my plan of attack, we're going to get it here, we're going to get it unboxed and take a look, then we're going to go and fly it raw au naturel, then we're going to take it to the slope soaring site. I've literally got a slope soaring site 15 minutes from me. We'll lob it off the side of a hill and see how it does, which just looking at it, it should be fine. And number 3, we'll load it up with iNav, etc. One thing which I perhaps are regretting slightly is that maybe I should have asked for the plug and play kit. If I'm perfectly honest, I may go back and see if I can wing it so I can have a plug and play kit instead. The reason being is that I have been caught out in the past with the motor choices for models like this. And I know even though it showed the motor in the nose just here a few moments ago, there we go. It looks like it's mounted like it's a normal like quad size motor mounted backwards. Mine may look a little bit funny. And it will actually, no, it should be all right. Hopefully it's just like a 2212 motor. What was their recommendation? We didn't really talk motors, did we? Let's nip back up. What motors? Yeah, 2208. So 2208, 2212, very similar size can motors, 2600 kV. That's a bit beefy for a 7-inch prop. No, oh, okay, give you a heads up. If you do buy the plug and play version, okay, a 2600 kV motor with a 7-inch 7.5 prop, you will have to run that on 2S. If you're going to run that on 3S or 4S, you're going to have to downsize that propeller dramatically. Otherwise, you're just going to pull far too many amps and you're just going to cook it. Okay, so don't do that. So if you do go for the plug and play kit, I'm sure it'll be perfect for 2S, but go very careful if you step up to 3S or higher, because you will burn that motor out with a larger propeller, okay, because the kV is so high. And typically 2208 or 2212 motors, they really are quite small. They're just like quad motors really, and they just, especially the cheaper ones, they just can't handle the amps, especially up at 2000 kV, because the windings in them are just so small in them. So just go a little bit careful of that. So actually, I'm not that bothered about the motor. Mine may look a little bit odd just for the distance between where the nose of the model finishes and where the nose cone starts. But that'll be my fault because I've gone for the kit version. I hope that makes sense. Right, let's bring ourselves round. I was asking you what you think of this model. I've been and shared a couple of observations of what I have been spotted on this model, and if I've missed anything, please let me know in the comments section. We would all appreciate that, and I genuinely mean that. Looking at models for the very first time from flat pictures can be quite challenging at times, and we can apply a couple of years experience, and we can make, we've seen other models here and gone, what the? But this one looks like, it just looks like it's going to fly well. Is that fair to say? Am I being fair by the photos and the information which we've got in front of us? I think it's just going to be a good model. I hope that we don't discover anything nasty about it, although I genuinely would be surprised if we did. Okay, so let me know what you think about the Eachine Razor. You can do that in the comments section underneath this video. I will put a link to this model so you can see exactly the same model which I'm looking at. I'll give you a heads up to be 100% clear, that will be an affiliate link, so if you use that link then you will be supporting this channel at no extra cost to you. Remember, that is something which I'm always transparent about as well. And also, to be 100% transparent, the moment this model came out, I shot Banggood an email and said, can I have one please? Because it's right up my street for those reasons which we mentioned earlier. A, I really like the drift. This looks like a bigger version of the drift. I think it's going to fly fantastic line of sight, whether that be in some playing fields or off the slope. And the real big curiosity, I think, for all of us is how is this model going to handle multiple, not just two 18650 Lion packs, but multiple 18650 Lion packs, and what kind of distance, range, capacity can we get out of this model? Very, very curious. But let's get one here, we'll take a look, and that's going to happen in the next couple of weeks, which is happy days. So with that said, any questions, comments, let me know in the comments section underneath this video. If you're new here, howdy, I'm Matt, welcome aboard. Don't forget to press the subscribe button and of course press the bell notification so that YouTube notifies you when the next video is out. Fingers crossed by the time you're watching this, this one's already on the way and it's going to be happy days. Looking forward to it. For more reasons than, yeah. I think I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at the model. I just genuinely think it's going to fly well. We're not expecting too many uncertainties with a model which looks like it should fly well compared to a certain other model, Eachine Airloader, which has so many questions about it and whether it will fly straight, let alone with one motor or five. This one's pretty obvious. It should do pretty well. Hey ho, so with that said, for myself, Matt, thank you for taking the time to join me here at the workbench for a dive into the Eachine Razor. Very curious. A good word, I think. So with that said, for myself, Matt, cheerios!